Welcome everybody to part 3 of the ego. If you've made it this far, congrats. It is not easy to learn this stuff. We're going to go a lot deeper. We're going to get a little bit on the woo-woo side towards the end, but the more we know about this ego and who we really are, better off we'll be. Here we go. We're going to continue on with ego tactics. I know there's a lot of these things, but they are important. Especially this one, right? Quest for power and control. Now that gives a lot of strength to the ego. Once you are in a position of power, you can feel superior to everyone else, right? You're above them. So now you can judge them and have all these little power trips. Now this goes all the way up from the dictator level, right? I mean, think about how much damage that kind of ego has done to the world. But this goes down to even just parenting, right? I mean, I'm often guilty of doing these little power trips. I want to control, right? Well, that's all ego. Or people with very simple jobs, you'll see them even do power trips. Why? Well, because it gives energy to the ego. Again, instead of judging these people, just look and go, oh, okay, I get it. They're getting some boost to the old ego by having that sense of power and control. The last tactic I'll talk about is probably one of the ego's best moves here. Negativity. It thrives on conflict, resistance, and strife. So now we really know why people are unhappy. Because the ego, which runs a lot of our lives, loves negativity. In fact, P.D. Ouspensky called negativity one of the biggest drains on our life. Expressing negativity is one of the biggest drains on living a fulfilled life. So things like pessimism, things like criticizing, including self-criticism, almost especially self-criticism, blaming other people, judging, complaining, creating enemies out of situations. We jump into that role of victim and we express all this negativity and it gets us absolutely nothing. And now you might be thinking, yeah, but isn't it okay to be like sad sometimes and express like negativity? Yeah, it's fine to be sad. It's a normal emotion. But expressing that negativity, think about what it has done for you in your life. In fact, it tends to just perpetuate more negativity. So just recognize it. Recognize it as a tool that the ego is using to get its way. And just try to back off on it a little bit at a time. Now with the ego using all of these tactics, we are unconsciously trying to get rid of it. We're unconsciously trying to get out of our heads. I mean, look at all the ways. These are some very negative ways that we get out of our heads and try to just give ourselves a break from our minds. And here's some more positive ways that we try to do it. So we're spending so much money and time and energy trying to be at peace instead of having that ego just run our lives. So who cares, right? Well, hopefully by now I've convinced you that we should. We all claim we want peace and happiness, right? Well, the ego is in the way. You, he said, are a terribly real thing in a terribly false world. And that, I believe, is why you're in so much pain. What false world is this? It's the false world of the ego and the ego's desires. It makes us think we need certain things in this life, and that is what causes us so much suffering. Think about all the problems these things cause. Conflict, stress, loneliness, misery. Problems with friendships and relationships. What about loss of knowledge? What happens when the truth hurts our egos? We don't listen. We put up our force field and we never learn that information. If you want to know what the ego sounds like, if you want to know its master plan, here it is. The ego says only when. Only when I've slept enough. Only when I've eaten enough. Only when I'm done with school. Only when I get a good grade. Only when we've won the game. Only when I know what's going on. Only when I get enough likes. Only when I'm thin enough. Only when I have a partner. Only when nothing is bothering me. Only when it's something fun to do. Only when it's nice outside. Only when I have a nice house, a nice car, husband and kids, or wife and kids, or whatever you need. Only when I make enough money. Only when I'm healthy. Only when I'm successful. Only when people respect me. Only when I don't fail. Only when I've achieved my goals, all of them. Only when the baby just stops crying. Only when I see the whole world. Only when I'm young. Only when I have the perfect job. Only when nothing bad happens. Only when everything is perfect. Then and only then I'll be happy and find peace. That's the argument that the ego gives to us every single day. That's what it's been trying to convince us all the time. Only when all these things. Alan Watts reminds us, if happiness always depends on something expected in the future, we are chasing a will-o'-the-wisp that ever eludes our grasp until the future and ourselves vanish into the abyss of death. So now we get to who we really are. If you've watched my other videos, I often talk about how we identify with our body, we identify with stuff, and I tell you, that's not who we are. And in this one I told you, well, we're not our mind either. Right? That voice that goes on, that's not you. That's not us. So then who the hell are we? We are that observer of the voice. Who's the thing? What's the substance? What's that backdrop that is observing it all? That's awareness. That's consciousness. And that's us. There's an analogy Eckhart Tolle gives of the sun and its rays. We think they're two separate things, but actually those rays came from the sun. They're from sun. The same thing with us and Source. We are Source. We are God. Okay? We've been convinced otherwise, that we're just these measly little beings, but we are everything. You're not a drop in the ocean. You're the entire ocean in a drop. Lao Tzu said, the ego is a monkey catapulting through the jungle, totally fascinated by the realm of the senses. It swings from one desire to the next, one conflict to the next, one self-centered idea to the next. If you threaten it, it actually fears for its life. Let this monkey go. Let the senses go. Let desires go. Let conflicts go. Let ideas go. Let the fiction of life and death go. Just remain in the center, watching, and then forget that you are there. Now the ego hates this idea, right? What do you mean forget that I am there? What do you mean let go of all my desires? That's all I live for. So now that we know what the ego is and who we are, how do we get a handle on this thing? How do we befriend our ego so it doesn't kind of control our lives? We can start by asking questions like this whenever we can remember. What's my relationship with the present moment? Am I here? Where was my mind just now? Am I labeling something as negative or positive that's happening right now? Our friend Billy Shakespeare said there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. We tend to label things, right, as either good or bad. Brownies are good, stubbing your toe bad. But actually, in reality, things just are, and then the brain goes ahead and labels it as negative or positive. Try a little body scan right now and find some part of you that's troubling you. Maybe it's an itch, maybe it's something that's sore. And now try to describe it without using any positive or negative words. Maybe you can use words like, well, I feel a little pressure, or there's a little tingling. Doing this starts to enable us to see things as just reality, just sensation. So there are many ways we give ourselves a break from the ego, creating inner space and stillness, stopping that tape recorder of our minds. Quiet the mind and the soul will speak. Allow that present moment to come back into our lives. Remember that there actually is only now. When did the past happen? Well, that was now. When is now happening? Now, obviously. And when is the future going to happen? Well, it's going to happen now. Yielding instead of resisting to situations. And you can feel this in your body. You can actually feel the tension when you're resisting what is because you want it to be different. Start that process of letting go, yielding, and softening the body. Prayer, meditation, and mindfulness all create this inner space and stillness. That's why they exist. Pay attention to the breath. It's a constant reminder. You can't pay attention to the breath without being right in the present moment. And just sink back into your body. Again, it's very difficult to be in your body and not be right in the present moment. And what about our suffering? You know, that thing that the ego loves to have us dwell on and create more of. Well, let's use that suffering for something good. Actually, there's nothing quite like suffering to keep us in the present moment. So transform that suffering into presence. Otherwise, it's just suffering. You're going to have those emotions and experiences and sensations anyways. Why not use it for something beneficial, like staying present? Acceptance of the ego can lead to self-transcendence. So when you try to fight it, that just makes the ego much stronger. But creating an awareness around, oh, there's my ego again. And with suffering, it's particularly important. Our ego wants us to jump back into that victim role so badly because it gives us attention. It makes us more miserable. So let's be aware of that as well. When do we jump into that role? Awareness is the greatest agent for change. Now, the last mistake we can make after learning about rationalization, the ego, and all of these little tricks is that we can rationalize everything we do and just blame it on the ego, and then shrug it off. Well, what does that do? That just makes the ego even stronger. So try to watch out for that. I know I've done it in the past. Try to just be aware. Oh, there's the ego. Okay, all right, let me become a little bit more aware of that. Now, did you ever notice in the FedEx sign that there's an arrow hidden in the letters? I don't know if it's intentional or not, but it's right there. And once you see it for the first time, you can never not see it again. You'll see it every time you see it. That's how it is when learning about the ego. Once you learn about it and all the little tricks that the ego plays, you start seeing it everywhere. You start seeing it in yourself and other people. Now again, it's going to be easier to see in other people because the ego loves to judge other people. So try not to do that. In fact, try to take that beam of light and shine it back on yourself and go, well, how do I get my ego needs fulfilled? So again, now that you know, start to people watch. Not in like a creepy way, just watch people and notice which ways they're getting their ego satisfaction. Try not to take it personally when people are doing these things for ego, when they reach out for attention, which is constant. Try not to take it personally when you do these things as well. Compassion comes from understanding, and you have a lot more understanding once you figure out the ego. So you can give other people a break, and you can give yourself a break. I highly, highly recommend any or all of these 3 books. They really changed my life. They changed my whole perspective on reality. So that's a pretty big endorsement, I think. They're much wiser people than me, so definitely check them out. Well, everybody, you did it. You made it to part 3 of ego, which is not easy. I hope you really let that stuff sink in and you start noticing it a lot more. And we'll see you for the next video. Thanks for watching.